After decades of teasing, years of rumours and months of anticipation, Star Wars Episode 1 finally hit the big screen. The worldwide sense of expectation was incredible. Star Wars was everywhere once again, albeit this time there was a difference. You see, for many of us, watching Star Wars Episode 1 was a father and son bonding exercise. I've no doubt I'm not the only one here whose dad took him to see the movie on its release day. My dad naturally loved the Star Wars movies when he was a kid, and so taking me to see the Star Wars in the movies was a way to pass the torch in a sense. The only problem with Star Wars Episode 1 as a movie is frankly awful. I'll never forget thinking, what the F has George Lucas done? He has created a new movie which felt awkward, separated and frankly lacking any real excitement. That wasn't until the final scenes of the movie. I make no defence of my actions, but I'm a huge racing game fan. It's surprising really, as I've next to no interest in cars in the real world, but something about racing games has always entertained me. So the pod race in Star Wars Episode 1 totally blew my mind. I'm of the opinion that the scene didn't exist in Star Wars Episode 1, it would have made the film an utter mess. However, it is without a doubt the single redeeming quality of the film, and as such LucasArts must have realised this would need to be the basis of a game to tie in with the movie. Licensed games are normally terrible. Heck, if you want to see just how bad some of them can be, then you need to go check out Kimball Justice's A to Z of licensed games, which is pretty much all you'll ever need to watch to know all there is to know about the topic. And whilst you're there, why not subscribe to him? He's one of my favourite YouTubers. Cheap plugs aside, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer was a multi-platform racing game developed by LucasArts, and in the N64 case published by Nintendo as the second game of their 3-game deal with the studio. If you've seen the movie, then you'll know what the game is about, but for any Padawans, then the game is based around pod racing. Essentially, they are two enormous overpowered engines held together by energy and floating nicely above the ground. They reach breakneck speeds and require insane reflexes to control. Straight away, the first comparison that will come into your head will be the Wipeout series. Futuristic racing, high speeds and tidy graphics make the game seem similar at first glance. But whilst many similarities exist, there are many features which make Episode 1 Racer the superior game in many ways. In the gameplay department, Episode 1 Racer honestly lacks any real mechanics to separate it from other racing games. The aim of the game is to race your pod across the Star Wars universe in a number of tournament races to be crowned champion. Do this over a number of contests and you'll unlock secret characters and pods as you go along. The basic aim is naturally to win the races, and it all comes down to speed, as there are no weapons to contest with, and so purist racers very much like myself will enjoy this. The main problem is that the game is quite simply too easy. Anyone picking up Episode 1 Racer should find that they'll easily fly their way through most of the tournaments within a couple of hours, and after which there is little to come back to. The courses are ranging and offer some challenging areas and environments. However, for me, the key with racing games is the excitement of going bumper to bumper with opponents. In Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, you'll often be leading the pack and opponents will either fly right past you or do very little to show aggression towards you. In the odd time when you're neck and neck with an opponent, one of you will most likely blow up when your engines collide. Taking away the sense of actually racing makes Episode 1 Racer feel more like time trial laps rather than epic race battles, which you'd have gotten the impression of from the movies. The controls are fantastic, and you will always feel in control of your pod despite travelling at hundreds of miles per hour, but overall playing Episode 1 Racer feels more like an isolating and lonely experience. Whilst there are no power-ups, there is the option to turbo boost, which requires track memorisation to know when the best time to charge and use it is. In the tournament mode, you'll find you rarely need to use this in order to win, but for time trial enthusiasts then this becomes vital for shaving seconds off your lap times. Moving away from some negatives, visually the game looks excellent. It is expansion pack compatible, so flipping the game into high-res mode adds a lovely level of clarity and increases the visual viewing field. This is important as the game contains many tight areas to race through or difficult turns that you really do need to be able to see a long way off. There are times that even with the expansion pack that the game suffers slowdown, but thankfully this seems to be isolated to times when there are multiple races on the screen. As I mentioned previously, this doesn't happen all that often, but due to the insane speed of the game it becomes really noticeable when slowdown occurs. The pods themselves all look awesome as they did in the movie. You'll see flaps and vents open and close and change in real time depending on how you're racing. There are also all of the characters from the movie complete with their own custom pods. The difficulty is that whilst there are a wealth of drivers and pods to choose from, they all seem to handle almost identically. Some are bigger and wider, whereas some are smaller and more agile, but despite playing with all of the pods on offer, I found myself lacking any real excitement when I unlocked a new racer. The N64 version also has some cutbacks which take away from the overall experience. The gorgeous PC version's cutscenes are not present here, and you're instead replaced with some very short and bland intros. In my last review, you remember how I raved about the attention to detail and the gorgeous cutscenes in Rogue Squadron, so I found it hard to understand how the N64 version of Pod Racer had to drop these. An issue across all releases of the game comes in the sound department. For a Star Wars game, this is frankly terrible. The epic scores and beautifully crafted music which you expect are non-existent. The music in the game is very subtle, and whilst racing, only during the final lap it picks up and gets any real life into it. The music itself seems more of a generic mix of orchestrated instruments rather than the free-flowing scores that I expected. Unfortunately, it's not just the music. Whilst the sound of the engines and crashes rip through the movie theatre, bringing the entire race to life, in the game, the engines sound more like leaf blowers than the state-of-the-art turbo engines. Crashes too sound flat and lacking any real depth to the sound. I hate to mention it in comparison to Rogue Squadron again, but it really is night and day in comparison. This is not saying that Episode 1 Racer is a terrible game. There are some awesome touches like being able to upgrade your pod by buying parts from the money you win from racing. Another cool addition is that you can also take a risk and visit the scrapyard to try and find used parts to upgrade your pod with. Sometimes you will find a gem, but other times you'll blow your money on a part which a few races in turns out to be a dud. Despite the game's flaws, it's still gained quite a following. There is a mode where you can plug a controller into port 1 and port 3 of the N64 console and actually play the game using two controllers' analog sticks. Controlling each engine is a great way to extend the life of the game and to offer a different take on a game which can quickly become boring. So much so that fans of the game are still racing it frequently even to this day. The extremely talented modding chaps over at Clarkey and Smithy Creations created a custom N64 controller dubbed the El Cuadranaros specifically for the purpose of playing Episode 1 Racer in the dual controller method. As a gift to the friend in the States, they fused two N64 controllers together in beautiful fashion as you can see here. The project took them 5 to 6 hours over a number of days to complete, and whilst I haven't got to give it a go myself, I've been told that it works flawlessly. And in a cool twist, you can also use this for other games such as GoldenEye, Perfect Dark and Robotron. For more information on the controller, consoles or handheld N64 mods, then really do go along and check out their channel. There's a link in the description down below, and for those asking, yes, they do take custom orders, so go get in touch with them to see what they might be able to do for you. So in closing, Episode 1 Racer is packed full of flaws, but with the strong Star Wars license behind it, it sold incredibly well on the N64. Stores were sold out of it for weeks sometimes, and the console bundle with the game revamped N64 console sales for the time. The game received mixed reviews by critics of the time, with some claiming it to be one of the best racing games ever, and others, like myself, felt it was a little bit flat with the overall experience. But who cares about critics? What I want to know is, how do you remember Star Wars Episode 1 Racer or the launch of the first new movie in the Star Wars trilogy? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, may the Force be with you.